Every single one of us belongs to this world. And this world needs you. You see, this world needs you to be brave. This world needs you to be kind. This world needs you to be the best version of yourself. This world needs you to belong. And this world needs you to be happy. But what is happiness? That is the question. You see, happiness is so complex and subjective because it means something different to every single one of us. See, we all have our own likes and dislikes. We're all unique. So the question isn't, what is happiness? The question is, what is happiness to me? And to understand that, we need to ask ourselves another question. We need to ask ourselves, who am I? Who am I? What are my likes and dislikes? What are my fundamental beliefs? Without them, I wouldn't be me. In other words, what are my core values? See, understanding our core values is so important to find where we belong in this world. Understanding our core values is so important to understand what makes us happy in this world. And my story begins at 22 years old when I joined the police force. Now, I didn't follow my core values, not on purpose. I just didn't ask myself the question, who am I? I didn't ask myself the question, what do I like? That meant throughout these 5 years that I was in the police force, I was deeply unhappy. But no wonder. I wasn't living an aligned life. A couple of my core values was freedom and spontaneity. Doesn't match with being a police officer, does it? But I hadn't asked myself those questions. And throughout my 5 years, there's so much negativity in my life. See, I was seeing the worst in people day in and day out. I was seeing death on a regular basis. I was losing faith in humanity and in myself. And I heard someone recently talk, and they said, there's no such thing as work-life balance. It's just life. It's just life. So no wonder I was so unhappy in my life, because I couldn't go home in my personal life and switch off. Seeing all that negativity build up in me, getting affected mentally with all what I was seeing. I wasn't going home to my personal life and being happy and positive. No, it doesn't work like that. And that negativity seeped in. And my mental health suffered dramatically. To a point in July 2018, when I didn't want to live anymore. I had enough of life. Looking back, I realized it wasn't that I had enough of life. It was just that I had enough of my life. I had enough of how my life looked. But on the day that I wanted to take my own life, I was saved. I looked down at my dog, and he looked back up at me, and he gave me a big lick. He saved me that day, because I thought to myself, how could I leave you? Who would give you the love and attention that I could? I'm here standing, talking to you all today because of him. And you see, although I didn't hit rock bottom again, I would describe myself as a functioning depressive. You see, I was living an unhappy life with fleeting happy moments, rather than a happy life, an aligned life with unhappy fleeting moments, because we can't be happy all the time. But I had an awakening, and that was my last ever shift. And on my last ever shift, I witnessed a young male take his own life. I was there with him as he took his last breaths in this world. Hours later, my colleague had a heart attack on shift and died. My colleague had 29 years service. One year left until retirement. And he'd often tell me about his plans for the future of his wife and the traveling they were going to do. But they never came to fruition. Those plans never came to reality. And that deeply affected me. I had to ask myself what I wanted in my life. And that last shift, it was like Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. I was being shown a past and a present and a future. A past, a young male taking his own life, that could have been me. A future, which could potentially have been me if I was willing to stay in a job that had such a detrimental impact on my mental health and my happiness. See, on that day, I was given a choice. I was given a choice to choose happiness and how my life looked. And my mental health deteriorated on that day to the point where it manifested itself in a physical injury in my knee. See, I tore my ACL. Now, I didn't tear my ACL in a sporting accident or a fall. My mind tore my ACL because it was the only way to make me stop. And for the next 5 months, I could barely walk. But that allowed me time to heal. It allowed me time away from the police. And I realized that my timeline that you see up there looked very different. My timeline looked a wee bit more like this. Traumatic incident after traumatic incident after traumatic incident. Some at the time, less traumatic than the others. But looking back, I realized that every single one of them were just as traumatic, just in different ways. And I realized that it was unhealed trauma. Because how can you heal from trauma when you're going from one traumatic thing to the next? How can you heal from that? And I knew that I couldn't take away all this trauma overnight. But what I could do was focus on my present. What I could do was focus on my happiness. And that's what I did. I took 7 steps to happiness. This is what I call it. I'll just go through the 7 steps with you now. The first one, this is to do with our emotions. There's 3 stages that we need to go through. Notice it, accept it, and heal it. We need to notice our emotions changing. I noticed I was sad. I noticed I was unhappy. But I didn't get to this next stage, the accept it stage. I didn't accept it to myself that I needed help. I didn't accept it to myself that I needed to talk. And they say people who accept their emotions, both positive and negative, are generally happier than people who suppress their emotions. That's because people who suppress their emotions remain in a negative state of mind, rather than people who accept their emotions, who can work through and process them. See, for so long in my life, I was remaining in that negative state until I eventually was able to accept that I needed help. And I was then eventually able to move on to the next stage, the heal it stage. And the healing journey will look different to every single one of us. But you need to go through these 3 steps. And you can't get to the next one until you complete the step you're on. Number 2, understand your core values. I already spoke a little bit about our core values. But it's not only important to understand our core values, we need to live by them. We need to make sure that every single decision that we make is aligned to our core values. Because if you can do that, you're living an aligned life. If you can do that, you're living a happier life. Number 3, sort your circle out. You are the average of the 5 people you spend your most time with. So make sure those people are people you admire. Make sure they're people you respect. Because if they're not, if they are negatively minded, you will suffer. And I need to sort my circle out. The next one, cut out things that make you unhappy. It's hard to know what makes us happy. Of course it's hard. But sometimes it's easier to know what makes us unhappy. And if we can understand what makes us unhappy, we can remove it from our lives. By process of elimination, if you remove things that make you unhappy in your life, you'll be left with things that make you happy. The thing that made me unhappiest was my career. So I left the police. The next thing that made me unhappiest was the relationship I was in at the time. So I cut that. By process of elimination, I was being left with things in my life that just made me happy. Next one. Let go of resentment and anger that you hold from previous things or people, because it won't serve anyone. And it will only affect you. See, when I was going through my healing journey, I was having a lot of PTSD symptoms. I went to the doctors and they did some blood tests and came back and said, oh, there's something wrong with your liver. We need to do further tests. And before those further tests, I had a silent counselling session. And in that silent counselling session, we looked at the different meridian points in your body, and it was highlighted that there was this built-up negative energy in my liver. And that represented anger and resentment. See, I had so much anger for the police and how they failed to deal with my mental health properly. They failed to provide a support network for me. And I resented myself for wasting 5 years of my life in a place where I didn't belong. But as we did this process of letting go of this negative energy, I went back to the doctor a couple of weeks later and we did the same bloods and stuff. The results came back and it was perfect. Liver was fine. Holding on to anger and resentment will only affect you, nobody else. Next one, be an optimist. I'd rather be an optimist and wrong than a pessimist and right. A negative mind is a broken mind. When I was negatively minded, it manifests itself in a physical injury. Now, it's easy to say be an optimist. I know that we can't be an optimist every single minute of every single day. That's just not how life works. But if you can be more optimistic than pessimistic, then you're on the right track. You're on the right track. See, I was so pessimistic in my life. I was surrounded with negativity, so of course I was pessimistic. But when I changed that, I noticed remarkable changes. I became happier. The last one, number 7, make you a priority. See, for so long in my life, I made everyone else a priority. I made their happiness a priority. But I realized that no one will make your happiness more of a priority than you. So say no to the things that don't align. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no. Make you a priority in your life for your own happiness. So these are the 7 steps that I took to a happier life. And I realized that happiness is a choice. It can be hard sometimes. Of course it can. But it's always an option. It's always there. And there's enough happiness for every single one of us in this room. We just need to understand what our happiness is, not what somebody else's happiness is. What is your happiness? So in this world, go be brave. Go be kind. Go be the best version of yourself. Find where you belong, and always choose happiness. Thank you.